The Galactic Council, a massive space station that floated in the heart of the Milky Way, was a place where species from all corners of the galaxy gathered to discuss peace, trade, and diplomacy. It was the hub of intergalactic politics, where the fate of billions of beings was decided. The council chambers were filled with representatives from the most powerful and ancient species in the galaxy. The room was vast, its walls lined with holographic displays showing star maps, trade routes, and the latest intelligence reports. Today, however, something was different. The usual calm and controlled atmosphere of the council was replaced with a tense, almost suffocating silence. The leaders of countless alien species, each one more powerful and ancient than the last, exchanged uneasy glances. An unexpected message had just arrived, and the news it carried had the power to shake the very foundation of the Galactic Council. At the head of the massive table sat Chancellor Oris, an ancient being from the Xenarian species. His skin was as smooth as marble, and his long, flowing robes shimmered with the light of distant stars. His piercing eyes, however, betrayed no emotion as he scanned the message that had been delivered moments ago. His hand trembled slightly as he placed it on the holographic interface, sending the message to the entire room. The words flickered into the air for all to see. Humanity rejects all peace offers. No terms, no compromises. They stand alone. The room erupted in chaos. "Impossible," shouted Vixer, a towering insectoid from the planet Rizzer. "How could they reject every offer? We've tried to reason with them. Their ignorance will lead to their destruction." Silence. Chancellor Oris barked, raising his hand. His voice carried the weight of centuries, and the room immediately fell quiet. A smaller, more slender figure, Zarfiel, a diplomat from the alien race of Zephyrians, leaned forward. His green skin glowed faintly as he spoke, his voice calm but with an undercurrent of concern. "There must be a misunderstanding. Humanity is not known for its rash decisions. If they have rejected peace, there is a reason. Perhaps we've overlooked something. Or perhaps they've grown too arrogant." Vixer snapped. "Humans think they are superior to us. This defiance proves it." Oris looked around the room, his expression unreadable. His mind raced as he weighed the implications of humanity's actions. For centuries, the Galactic Council had tried to bring order to the galaxy, but humanity had always been an enigma. Unpredictable, passionate, and fiercely independent. They had never fully embraced the Council's leadership, but until now, they had never outright rejected it. The holographic display flickered again, showing a video feed from the human representative, Admiral Sarah Wright, leader of humanity's delegation. She appeared on the screen, her expression stern and unwavering. "Council," she said, her voice cold and confident, "we, humanity, will not be bound by your peace proposals. We will not compromise our values or our freedom. The galaxy may think it can control us, but you are mistaken. We stand alone, and we will defend our sovereignty by any means necessary." The room was silent once again. The other representatives exchanged shocked looks, their disbelief palpable. "This is madness," growled Klar, a hulking warrior from the planet Koreth. His species was known for their strength and battle prowess, but even he could not understand humanity's decision. "They think they can face us alone. The Council has enough power to crush them in an instant." "You misunderstand, Klar," Zarfiel replied, his tone still calm. "Humanity is not like the others. They are unpredictable, but they are also resilient. Their refusal may not be a challenge to our power. It may be a challenge to our unity." The tension in the room continued to build. Oris's mind raced as he thought of every possible outcome. He had known humanity would be difficult to bring into the fold of the Galactic Council, but this was something entirely different. Something had changed in them. "We must act quickly," Klar urged, standing to his feet. "If humanity thinks they can defy us, we must teach them a lesson. Show them that the Council does not tolerate defiance." "Peace is still an option," Zarfiel countered, his voice steady. We must not rush to war. There is still a chance to reason with them, to understand why they rejected us. We've given them every chance, Vixer hissed. Now they have rejected us, and they will pay the price. Oris raised his hand again, signaling for silence. He had been around for longer than most of the species in the room had existed, and he knew the importance of patience. But even he couldn't ignore the unsettling feeling in the pit of his stomach. Humanity's actions were not those of a weak species. They were the actions of a species that had something to prove. We must call for a vote, Oris said, his voice commanding attention. But we must be careful. This is not just about power. It is about the future of the galaxy. As the council members debated their next course of action, the tension in the room reached its peak. The fate of the galaxy hung in the balance, and all eyes were now on humanity. The Galactic Council had always been the ultimate authority in the galaxy, but for the first time, it seemed that humanity had dared to challenge that authority. And in doing so, they had created a crisis that no one could predict. The Galactic Council had never faced anything like this. The vast chamber, once full of hope and purpose, now buzzed with tension. Representatives from each corner of the galaxy exchanged worried glances, their faces marked with disbelief. The rejection of peace was more than just an unexpected move. It was an affront to the unity the Council had fought so hard to maintain. For centuries, the galaxy had known only one power, one guiding hand, the Galactic Council. And yet here, in this very chamber, humanity had torn that unity asunder with a single defiant message. The ambassadors of the smaller species, those who relied on the stability and protection the Council offered, began to murmur anxiously. Their voices were soft at first, but soon the fear became palpable. Humanity has never been easy to understand. One of them, a diplomat from the planet Ryloth, whispered nervously. But this is war. The words hung heavy in the air. There was no denying it. Humanity's rejection of peace felt like a declaration. No species had ever dared to stand so boldly against the Council. The political structure that had ensured the galaxy's survival for centuries now seemed fragile and vulnerable. If humanity was prepared to face the entire galaxy on their own terms, what would the future look like? Oris, the Chancellor, sat still, his mind deep in thought. He had seen many challenges in his long life, but this was something different. Humanity's rejection wasn't born of ignorance or pride. It was a strategic decision. He could feel it. The humans had something up their sleeves, something more dangerous than any weapon or military force. His thoughts were interrupted by the voice of Ambassador Ziv, the representative from the highly advanced Siluri species. Ziv was known for his sharp intellect, and his words were always precise, calculated. Chancellor, Ziv began, his voice calm but filled with tension. We've studied humanity for centuries. We've known their independent nature, their reluctance to join the Council fully. But this is unprecedented. To reject every peace offer, to turn their back on the very fabric that binds this galaxy together, there must be more at play. Oris nodded slowly, acknowledging Ziv's insight. Yes, the humans are not fools. They understand the consequences of their actions. They know this could lead to war, yet they still chose to reject us. But why? Ziv's glowing blue eyes seemed to flicker with thought. Perhaps they have a reason. Perhaps they are not rejecting us in the way we think. They could be rejecting our control, our vision of the galaxy. They may believe we are too rigid, too focused on maintaining power rather than fostering true peace. A quiet hush fell over the room as Oris digested Ziv's words. The Council had always prided itself on unity, on guiding the galaxy toward peace through negotiation and compromise. But what if humanity saw that peace as something that came at too high a price? What if to them, the Council was no longer a beacon of hope, but a symbol of oppression, of control? It was a terrifying thought, and yet it felt real. If they truly wished to stand against us, we must be prepared. Kalar, the warrior from Korath, growled, his massive hands gripping the edge of the table. His sharp tusks gleamed as he spoke. "They have made a grave mistake. Humanity does not have the power to face us in open conflict. We should crush them now, while we have the chance." "No," Zarfiel, the Zephyrian diplomat, replied calmly, his voice carrying a steady wisdom. "We must not rush into war. Humanity's rejection is not a declaration of hostility. It's a call to understand. They've made their stance clear, but we must learn why. There is more to this than pride or arrogance. There is a greater game at play here." Oris raised his hand, signaling for silence. The debate was growing heated, and his mind was in turmoil. He had seen Kalar's type before, warriors who believed that strength could solve any problem. But Zarfiel was right. There was something more to humanity's rejection than just a desire to test the Council's might. Humanity had always been unpredictable, yes, but they were also incredibly resourceful and strategic. To face them head-on without understanding their reasoning would be a mistake. "We need information," Oris said finally, his voice steady and commanding. "Send a delegation. We will meet with humanity's leaders and try to understand their motivations. We must know their true intentions before we make our next move." The room quieted, and the council members exchanged uneasy glances. Sending a delegation to meet humanity meant taking a risk. Humanity had never fully trusted the council, and the risk of rejection or worse, an ambush, was high. But Oris knew it was the only way to avoid making a catastrophic decision based on assumption alone. "I will volunteer," Zarfiel said after a moment, his tone resolute. "The Zephyrians have a long history of diplomatic efforts with humanity. We understand their nature better than most." Oris nodded approvingly. "You may go, Zarfiel. Take a small, trusted team with you. We need answers, not threats." Zarfiel bowed slightly. "Understood, Chancellor." As Zarfiel and his team began to prepare for their journey, the rest of the council members continued their discussions. They spoke of the various possibilities that might come from humanity's actions, some optimistic, others less so. But in the back of their minds, all of them knew one thing. Humanity had just set the stage for something far bigger than anyone had anticipated. The fate of the galaxy now hung in the balance. The Council was no longer united, and the very idea of peace seemed more fragile than ever before. Humanity had opened a door, and no one could predict where it would lead. In a small corner of the galaxy, far from the Council's reach, humanity stood poised on the edge of something new, something unknown. And as the Council debated, humanity's leaders, like Admiral Sarah Wright, prepared for the next phase of their plan. One thing was clear: this was no ordinary rejection. This was the beginning of a new chapter, one that would forever alter the course of the galaxy. And the Galactic Council was about to learn just how far humanity was willing to go to protect their future. The air around the Galactic Council was thick with uncertainty. The debate over humanity's rejection had only just begun, but already the seeds of distrust had been sown among the various species. While some, like Kalar, were eager to take action, others like Zarfiel remained cautious, urging restraint. Oris, however, knew that no decision made in haste would serve the galaxy well. The events unfolding before them were more complex than anyone could have anticipated. As the Council's deliberations continued, a small fleet of ships departed from the station, bound for Earth. Zarfiel, the Zephyrian diplomat, was among them, accompanied by a select group of emissaries from various species. They were tasked with delivering a message of peace, but also to learn, to understand. Humanity's rejection had not come from ignorance or pride. It was a calculated move, and one that required careful consideration. The journey to Earth was swift, but the tension on board the diplomatic ships was palpable. The delegation, made up of highly skilled diplomats, scientists, and military strategists, sat in silence as the stars streaked by. None of them knew what they would find upon arrival. Would humanity extend an olive branch, or would they double down on their refusal to join the galactic fold? Zarfiel sat in the observation deck, watching as the vastness of space unfolded before him. His species had always been about balance and understanding, traits that had served them well in their diplomatic efforts. But humanity was different. They were unpredictable, passionate, and often willing to go to extremes to achieve their goals. He could sense the weight of the responsibility on his shoulders. The Council had given him a task that could determine the fate of the galaxy itself. He turned to his fellow delegate, Lyra, a highly respected diplomat from the Syrith, a species known for their keen strategic minds. She was studying a holographic display of Earth's current state, its politics, its technological advancements, its military might. "Lyra," Zarfiel began, his voice quiet, "what do you think of humanity's rejection? Is it a sign of strength, or is it desperation?" Lyra looked up from the display, her golden eyes narrowing thoughtfully. "It's neither. Humanity isn't desperate, at least not in the way we would understand. They're evolving, Zarfiel. Their history shows a tendency to fight for what they believe in, even when it seems futile. But this is different. They've rejected the peace offers not because they don't want peace, but because they want something more. Something they feel the Council cannot give them." Zarfiel frowned. "What could they want that we haven't offered?" "I believe it's not about what we've offered," Lyra replied. "It's about what we represent. The Council has always been about maintaining the status quo, about unifying the galaxy under a single banner. But humanity, they don't want to be unified in that way. They don't want to lose their individuality, their freedom. They want autonomy, the ability to make their own decisions without interference." Zarfiel nodded slowly, understanding her point. Humanity had always been fiercely independent. In many ways, their history was defined by their ability to stand alone, to fight against overwhelming odds and emerge victorious. It wasn't just about survival for them. It was about maintaining control over their own destiny. "Perhaps we've underestimated them," Zarfiel murmured. Lyra didn't respond immediately, her gaze still fixed on the holographic display. "Perhaps, or perhaps we've overestimated our ability to offer them what they truly need." As the fleet approached Earth, the ships began to enter the planet's atmosphere, and the tension aboard them grew. There was no telling how humanity would respond to the arrival of the Galactic Council's delegation. The message they carried was one of peace, but also of warning. If humanity refused to cooperate, the consequences could be dire. Zarfiel and his team disembarked in a secluded area outside of Earth's most prominent capital cities. A message had been sent ahead, requesting a formal meeting with humanity's leaders, but no one knew for certain whether the humans would honor it. If they didn't, it would be a clear signal that the time for diplomacy had passed. The delegation was met by a group of human soldiers, armed but not hostile. Their leader, a tall, imposing figure with a sharp gaze, stepped forward. His uniform bore the insignia of the United Earth Federation, but there was something else about him that made Zarfiel uneasy, an air of calculation, of quiet determination. "I am General Harrison," the human said, his voice firm but respectful. "You've been expecting us." Zarfiel stepped forward, his robes shimmering in the light as he offered a bow. "Indeed, we come in peace, General. The Galactic Council has sent us to understand why humanity has rejected our peace proposals." The general didn't immediately respond, his expression unreadable. Instead, he motioned for the delegates to follow him. As they walked through the heavily guarded facility, Zarfiel couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched closely, that humanity wasn't entirely willing to trust the Council. They reached a large, circular room where a group of humans stood waiting. Among them was Admiral Sarah Wright, the leader of humanity's delegation who had made the bold statement rejecting the Council's peace offers. Her presence was commanding, and her eyes locked onto Zarfiel, with a mixture of curiosity and resolve. "I assume you have questions," Admiral Wright said, her voice as calm and calculated as ever. Zarfiel nodded. "Indeed. We need to understand your reasoning, Admiral. Why have you chosen to reject peace with the Galactic Council? Why are you willing to stand alone against all of us? Sarah's gaze never wavered. Because peace, as the Council defines it, is not peace. It is control. We won't surrender our sovereignty to anyone, not even to you. We are not interested in being part of a system that dictates our choices. We've seen how the Council operates, how it manipulates species for its own ends. Humanity doesn't fit into that mold. Zarfiel was taken aback. The intensity of her words, the depth of her conviction, it was more than just political resistance. Humanity's rejection of the Council wasn't a simple refusal, it was an ideological statement. This isn't just about control, Admiral Wright continued. This is about our future. We believe that the galaxy must evolve without the interference of the Council. Humanity wants to chart its own course, even if that means facing the challenges that come with it. Zarfiel absorbed her words, feeling the weight of them. He had expected resistance, but he hadn't anticipated such a passionate defense of humanity's autonomy. He had come seeking answers, but now he understood that the answers were not so easily found. Humanity wasn't rejecting peace. They were rejecting the Council's vision for the galaxy. And in doing so, they were challenging everything the Galactic Council stood for. The room fell silent as Zarfiel processed the gravity of the situation. He knew this was only the beginning. There was much more to understand, much more to uncover. But one thing was certain. Humanity had set the stage for a conflict that would change the course of the galaxy forever. The days following the arrival of the Galactic Council's delegation on Earth were tense. Zarfiel and his team had been granted access to a secure, heavily guarded facility where they were able to continue their discussions with humanity's leaders. However, the atmosphere was far from cordial. The air was thick with suspicion and defiance. Humanity had made its stance clear, and it was not about to bend. Zarfiel found himself reflecting on the words of Admiral Sarah Wright. Her rejection of the Council's proposals had not been a rash decision, but rather a deliberate, carefully considered stance. As he sat in the sterile, dimly lit meeting room, his mind raced. Humanity was different from any species he had encountered. Their history, their survival, their resilience, it was a testament to their strength. But the rejection of the Council's offer went beyond the obvious. There was a deeper undercurrent, something Zarfiel couldn't quite grasp. Lyra, the Syrith diplomat, sat across from him, her sharp gaze fixed on a datapad. She hadn't spoken much since they arrived, but Zarfiel could feel the weight of her thoughts. She was deep in consideration, analyzing every aspect of the situation with the precision her species was known for. Zarfiel, Lyra said after a long silence, her voice steady but filled with concern. Do you think we've misjudged humanity? I keep thinking about what Admiral Wright said. She didn't just reject us, she rejected everything we represent. The Council is a force for unity, but what if that's exactly what they're against? What if they see the Council not as a force for peace, but as a force for control? Zarfiel looked up from his own thoughts, meeting her gaze. I've been wondering the same thing, Lyra. They don't want peace on their terms. They want it on their own. The Council believes in order, in a structured system of governance, but humanity values freedom. They reject anything that feels like a surrender of their autonomy. Lyra nodded slowly, her fingers tapping against the datapad. But if they continue to resist, there's no telling what the consequences could be. The Council won't tolerate defiance for long, and there are factions within the Council that are already speaking of force. Zarfiel could feel the tension rising. Lyra was right. While many species in the Council were patient and willing to negotiate, others were more militant. The fact that humanity had rejected the peace offer wasn't sitting well with everyone, and the calls for action were beginning to grow louder. The question is, Zarfiel murmured, what will it take for humanity to change its stance? What will it take for them to see the value in unity, in working together for the greater good of the galaxy? Lyra paused, her expression darkening. I don't think they'll change unless they see the consequences of their choices, and I don't think the Council is prepared to offer anything more than the option of joining. There's no middle ground. The question now isn't whether humanity will accept peace, but whether they'll survive the consequences if they don't. Zarfiel looked out the window of the meeting room, his thoughts distant. He had always believed that diplomacy could solve any conflict. The idea that force might be required to bring humanity into the fold was unsettling. It wasn't just about military might. It was about something deeper, something intrinsic to the nature of the galaxy itself. Peace was fragile, and the Council's unity depended on its members accepting the terms of their collective existence. Humanity's refusal to join disrupted that fragile peace. Just then, a voice interrupted his thoughts. A human officer, one of the guards assigned to protect the delegation, stepped into the room. "Zarfiel, Lyra," he said, "there's been a development. Admiral Wright has requested another meeting. She insists on speaking directly with you both." Zarfiel exchanged a glance with Lyra, who raised an eyebrow in surprise. It was rare for a human leader to initiate a meeting on such short notice, especially under these circumstances. But there was a sense of urgency in the officer's voice that couldn't be ignored. Zarfiel stood, motioning for Lyra to follow him as they left the room. The walk through the facility was swift, the air thick with the sense of impending change. As they approached the meeting room where the Admiral waited, Zarfiel couldn't help but feel the weight of what was coming. They had come to Earth to offer peace, but it seemed that humanity wasn't interested in a simple agreement. They were willing to challenge the entire foundation of the Galactic Council's existence. When they entered the meeting room, Admiral Wright was waiting. She stood at the head of a large conference table, her posture rigid and commanding. Her eyes locked onto Zarfiel as they entered, and she gestured for them to sit. "I'm glad you've decided to join me," Admiral Wright said, her voice cold but not unkind. "There's something I need to make clear to you, Zarfiel, and to the Council. Humanity doesn't need you. We don't need your peace offers, your unity, or your oversight. We've managed to survive on our own for centuries, and we will continue to do so. The question is, will you respect that, or will you force us into submission?" Zarfiel felt a cold chill run through him at her words. There was no mistaking the resolve in her voice. She wasn't just speaking for herself. She was speaking for all of humanity. The rejection wasn't personal. It was ideological. Humanity was not going to bend, not for the Council, and not for anyone else. "I understand your position, Admiral," Zarfiel replied carefully, choosing his words with care. "But you must understand that the galaxy's future is at stake. The Council represents something greater than just a political entity. It is a vision of peace, of cooperation, of a future where all species work together for the benefit of all." Admiral Wright leaned forward, her gaze unwavering. "That's your vision, Zarfiel, not ours. We believe in the strength of the individual, the power of freedom, and the right to determine our own future. If you can't respect that, then we have no place in your galaxy." Her words echoed in the room, heavy with finality. Zarfiel could feel the tension mounting, the line between diplomacy and confrontation growing thinner with each passing second. "There is no easy answer to this," Zarfiel said, his voice barely above a whisper. "But if humanity is determined to go down this path, we must understand the consequences. The Council will not allow one species to stand apart if it threatens the balance." Admiral Wright's expression remained unchanged, but there was a flicker of something in her eyes. Perhaps it was the recognition of the gravity of the situation. Perhaps it was the realization that the Council's patience was running thin. But whatever it was, Zarfiel knew one thing for certain. Humanity had just taken its first step towards something much greater than any of them had anticipated. The future was uncertain, and the stakes were higher than ever. The tension that followed Admiral Wright's declaration rippled through the room, thick and heavy. Zarfiel could feel the weight of the situation pressing against him, the uncertainty of what would come next hovering like a storm cloud ready to burst. Humanity had made its stance clear. Their defiance, once a whisper, was now a roar. This was no longer just a diplomatic standoff. It had become a defining moment in the history of the galaxy. As Zarfiel sat in the cold silence that followed, his mind raced. He had studied humanity's history extensively before arriving on Earth, but no amount of preparation could have truly prepared him for this moment. The sheer force of will that this species possessed was unlike anything he had encountered before. Their history was filled with struggles, wars, and perseverance. They had fought battles on every front, against every type of enemy. And yet here they were, standing against the might of the Galactic Council, refusing to bow. Lyra's voice cut through the silence, sharp and thoughtful. Do you think they truly understand the consequences of their actions? She leaned forward, her eyes never leaving Admiral Wright, who sat with an unwavering look of determination. Zarfiel took a deep breath, trying to find the right words. I don't know, Lyra. I don't know if they fully grasp the depth of what they're challenging. The Council is not just a political entity. It's a collective of the most powerful civilizations in the galaxy. If they continue down this path, they may find themselves facing forces they're not prepared for. Admiral Wright's eyes flicked to him, an almost imperceptible glint of amusement crossing her face. Let me be clear, Zarfiel, she said slowly, her voice carrying the weight of experience. Humanity doesn't fear the Council. We don't fear anyone, not anymore. We've had our share of battles, our share of victories. We've survived and thrived. And if we have to fight to protect our autonomy, we'll do it, whatever it takes. Zarfiel stood, unable to sit still as the full impact of her words began to sink in. He had anticipated resistance, but not this level of unwavering defiance. You speak of survival, he said, his voice low. But survival at what cost? There are threats out there that you cannot even begin to understand, Admiral. The galaxy is a vast and dangerous place, and if humanity insists on standing alone, it will be a matter of time before those dangers find you. Admiral Wright's expression hardened. We've faced danger before, Zarfiel. We know what's at stake. But this isn't just about survival. It's about something more fundamental. Freedom. The freedom to make our own choices, to chart our own path. If that means standing alone, so be it. Zarfiel felt a pang of frustration gnawing at him. He understood the value of freedom, but what humanity failed to realize was that their isolation would come with a price that, once paid, could not be undone. Freedom, Zarfiel repeated, the word tasting bitter on his tongue. You talk of freedom as if it exists in a vacuum. But freedom isn't just the absence of control. It's the presence of protection, the assurance that your actions don't put others at risk. The Council offers you that protection, the unity of many species working together for the common good. That's the kind of future we're offering. Not control, Admiral. Security. Lyra added, her voice calm but laced with warning. The future you seek, Admiral, could be much darker than you imagine. The galaxy is teeming with threats, some you may not even be aware of. If humanity isolates itself, it will become a target. And I don't think you're ready for that. Admiral Wright's eyes narrowed, but her voice remained steady. We've faced worse. We don't need your protection, Lyra. We need to be left to make our own decisions. You may see us as naive or reckless, but I assure you, we are neither. Zarfiel stepped closer to the table, his gaze locked with the Admiral's. I didn't come here to argue with you, Admiral. I came here to offer a chance for something greater, something that could benefit all of us. But if humanity chooses to reject that, then I can only hope you understand the consequences. For a long moment, the room was still. The tension was palpable, and yet neither side seemed willing to budge. It was as if the stalemate between them had become more than just a political disagreement. It was a clash of ideologies, a battle between the vision of the future that Zarfiel represented and the one Admiral Wright and her people were determined to forge. Finally, Admiral Wright spoke again, her voice quieter now, but no less resolute. You've made your point, Zarfiel. But so have we. You say you offer peace, but what you really offer is submission. And that we will never accept. We will fight for our right to choose our own path, even if it means standing alone. Zarfiel felt a deep sense of loss as he listened to her words. This wasn't just a rejection of the Council, it was a rejection of everything he had hoped for. The future he had envisioned, one of unity and cooperation, seemed more distant now than ever before. "Then you have made your decision," Zarfiel said, his voice heavy with finality. "But understand this, Admiral. Once that path is chosen, there is no turning back. The galaxy is not kind to those who choose to stand apart." Admiral Wright didn't respond. Instead, she turned her gaze to the window, her mind clearly far from the conversation at hand. The meeting had ended, but the battle had just begun. Zarfiel knew that. Whatever happened next, humanity's rejection of the Council had changed everything. There was no going back from this point, and the path forward would be fraught with uncertainty. For both the Galactic Council and for humanity, the future was now in their own hands. Stars outside the observation window seemed to mock the tension inside the room. Zarfiel stood at the edge of the Council chamber, staring into the vast expanse of the galaxy. The weight of the situation pressed down on him like a physical force. Humanity had made its choice, and now the galaxy would have to deal with the consequences. As the emissary from the Galactic Council, it was his responsibility to ensure peace, but it seemed that his mission had failed. Humanity had rejected the peace offers, rejecting everything the Council stood for. The next steps were unclear, but one thing was certain. Zarfiel could not leave Earth without understanding what had driven the humans to such a bold stance. Admiral Wright's defiance had been unmistakable, but there was something deeper at play here, something that went beyond simple pride. This was about more than just rejecting the Council's offers. It was a declaration of independence, a refusal to be controlled. But why? What had shaped humanity into such a force? Zarfiel's thoughts were interrupted as Lyra approached, her expression grim. Her usual air of calm was gone, replaced by something more urgent. "Zarfiel," she said softly, as if the very act of speaking might disrupt the fragile peace they still clung to, "I think it's time we reconsider our strategy." He turned to face her, meeting her eyes. "Reconsider? How do you propose we do that, Lyra?" Humanity has drawn its line in the sand. They are unwilling to negotiate, unwilling to yield. What more can we offer them? Lyra's lips tightened, and she looked away toward the stars, deep in thought. Maybe it's not about offering them more. Maybe we need to understand why they're rejecting us in the first place. Maybe it's not about politics or power. Maybe it's something more fundamental. Zarfiel frowned, still processing the weight of her words. "What do you mean?" Lyra took a slow breath. Humanity's entire history is defined by struggle. They fight for survival, for dominance, for a place in the universe. But what we don't understand is that in their eyes, the struggle is everything. It's not just about what they can gain. It's about what they can overcome. Every time they face defeat, they rise up, stronger, more determined. This fight, Zarfiel, isn't about winning. It's about proving that they don't need anyone's help to survive. They want to show the galaxy that they are capable of standing on their own, no matter the odds. Zarfiel turned her words over in his mind. It made sense, in a way. Humanity had been through countless wars, famines, and struggles throughout their history. They had fought for survival against invaders, disease, and even their own kind. But there was something about this defiance that still eluded him. Why reject help when survival itself was at stake? "We could offer them a partnership," Zarfiel said, trying to think through the possibilities. "Not domination, not control. A true partnership, one that honors their autonomy. What if we show them that we're not here to conquer, but to stand alongside them?" Lyra shook her head slowly, her expression thoughtful. "You don't understand, Zarfiel. It's not about a partnership. It's about freedom. They don't want to be beholden to anyone. They want to make their own choices, even if those choices lead to danger. They believe in their right to choose their destiny, no matter the cost." Zarfiel could feel his frustration building again. But their choices are reckless. They can't just ignore the risks of isolation. The galaxy is a dangerous place, full of threats they don't understand. Lyra's voice softened. They understand it better than you think. They've faced horrors we can't even imagine. And yet, they still rise. They see their survival as their strength, their defining trait. If they accept help, they risk losing that strength. It's not just about fear of the unknown. It's about preserving the very core of who they are. Zarfiel let out a long, slow breath, looking back out at the stars. So what do you suggest we do now? Lyra hesitated, clearly weighing her words. I think we need to back off. For now. Let them breathe. Let them come to us when they realize the cost of their decisions. Trying to force them into submission will only push them further away. But if we leave them to navigate their own future, they may just find that they need our help. Zarfiel stared at her, his mind racing. It was a dangerous gamble, giving humanity space to make their own mistakes. But perhaps it was the only way forward. He had come here to guide them. But maybe the best way to help was to let them find their own way. After all, it was their right to choose their path, just as it was his right to decide how to approach this new, uncharted chapter in the galaxy's history. What if they don't come to us? Zarfiel asked, his voice low. Lyra looked at him with a steely resolve. Then we'll face the consequences, but at least we'll know that we gave them the opportunity to make their own choices. The silence that followed was heavy, filled with the weight of the unknown. Zarfiel wasn't sure what the future held, but for the first time in a long while, he realized that sometimes the most powerful thing one could do was nothing at all. The galaxy had never seemed so vast, and yet, to Zarfiel, it felt smaller than ever before. The weight of his decision hung over him like a dark cloud. He had chosen to step back, to give humanity the space they needed to decide their future, but the consequences of that choice were beginning to surface in ways he hadn't anticipated. The calm that had followed the Council's decision to withdraw had only been temporary, and now new forces were starting to stir. Zarfiel stood at the helm of the Council's flagship, staring out at the starry expanse once again. His thoughts were a tangled mess of uncertainties. He had hoped that humanity would come to their senses, realizing the dangers they faced alone. But the longer he watched, the more it became clear that they were not the ones who needed to be convinced. It was the Council that had misjudged the situation. It was the galaxy's leaders who needed to understand humanity's unyielding spirit, its capacity to defy the very forces that threatened to destroy it. The comm channel blinked on, interrupting his reverie. Lyra's voice came through, calm yet urgent. Zarfiel, we've got a problem. He didn't need to ask for details. He had known this moment was coming. What's happened? There's a fleet. Humanity's mobilized. They've begun amassing ships in defense of their borders. They've formed a new alliance, and they're preparing to face the galactic threat head-on. Zarfiel's pulse quickened, but he remained calm. He had expected this, but the realization that it was no longer a theoretical possibility made it real. Humanity was not just rejecting peace, they were preparing for war, against the entire galaxy. They've allied themselves. Zarfiel repeated, his mind racing. Yes, and it's not just any alliance. They've reached out to factions we thought were long gone, the remnant colonies, the rogue planets that have stayed in the shadows for years. Humanity has united them, and now they're preparing for something big. They're not just defending their world anymore. They're making the statement. Zarfiel's eyes narrowed. It wasn't just a battle for survival. It was a fight for recognition, a fight for independence. The humans had formed an alliance of their own, something he had underestimated. They were no longer a fragmented species. They were a force to be reckoned with. How serious are they? Zarfiel asked, his voice low. Very serious, Lyra replied. They've launched a fleet of their own. And their ships, they're unlike anything we've seen before. They've adapted human technology in ways we couldn't imagine. They're stronger, faster, and more efficient than anything we've ever encountered. Zarfiel felt a shiver run down his spine. Humanity's innovation had always been their greatest strength, But now, they had taken it to an entirely new level. The implications were staggering. The galaxy had been underestimating them for too long, dismissing them as primitive. But this was no longer the case. Humanity had risen to the occasion, and now they were playing a game they had once been too small to even consider. "This changes everything," Zarfiel muttered, more to himself than to Lyra. "I think you're right," she agreed. "They've shown us that they're not just fighting for survival anymore. They're fighting for their place in the galaxy. And they're willing to take on the entire council if that's what it takes." Zarfiel felt his chest tighten. He had always respected humanity's resilience, but now that respect was mixed with a growing sense of fear. They were not only challenging the council's authority, they were challenging the very fabric of the galaxy's political structure. "Have we received any communications from them?" Zarfiel asked, his mind now focused on the strategic implications. "Only a warning. They've made it clear that they will not back down. Their message was simple: stay out of our way, or we'll show you why we were the last to be considered." Lyra's voice was steady, but Zarfiel could hear the underlying concern. A chill ran through him. Humanity wasn't afraid anymore. They had taken the first step, and now there was no turning back. They had united with their neighbors and were willing to risk everything for their freedom. This was no longer a matter of diplomacy. It was a matter of survival, for both humanity and the galaxy itself. "What do you propose we do?" Zarfiel asked, already sensing what Lyra might say. "We need to talk to them," she said. "We need to understand exactly what they're after and find some way to coexist. But we also need to prepare for the worst. If they don't back down, we'll have no choice but to respond." Zarfiel's mind raced with the possibilities. The Council had no choice but to confront humanity's challenge. But the stakes were higher than ever before. One misstep, and the galaxy could be plunged into a war that no one would be able to stop. He took a deep breath, steeling himself for what was to come. "I'll contact the Council. We need to move quickly and decisively." "Agreed." "But, Zarfiel..." Lyra hesitated, her voice tense. "If we don't find a way to bridge the gap between us and humanity, the consequences could be catastrophic." Zarfiel nodded, though the gravity of her words weighed heavily on him. Humanity had rejected the peace offers, and now they were challenging the galaxy's order in a way that no one had expected. The future of the galaxy was hanging by a thread, and it was clear that the next few moves would determine the course of history. As the comm channel went silent, Zarfiel couldn't help but feel a strange sense of respect for humanity. They had rejected peace, but now they were fighting for something more powerful: their place in the universe.